For years, MotoGP officials told fans the playing field was competitive, that spending was under control and the best rider usually won. But over the past year, internal development summaries told a different story. One top factory program quietly pushed seasonal spending past $50 million, not on riders or marketing, but on testing, aerodynamics, simulation, and off-book development routed through partner firms. Now, before anyone says, that's just racing, here's why it matters to riders like us. When money decides results before the bike hits the grid, competition becomes predictable. Stick with me to the end, because once you see where this money really goes, the sport looks very different. The $50 million shockwave, nobody expected the leak to hit with the force it did. When the figure first slipped out, over $50 million poured into a single season by one top team. It sent a tremor through every garage and boardroom in the paddock. Folks who had spent decades around racing said they had never seen numbers like this, outside manufacturer takeovers or full-scale corporate rescue plans. The leak came from a stack of internal summaries tucked inside a routine financial packet. A packet that should have been scrubbed clean before its release. Instead, someone missed a line, and that line exposed a spending surge that had no business being in a sport already stretched thin by rising costs. Insiders froze when they read it. They knew what that kind of money could buy. Private testing weeks, prototype frames, aerodynamic programs that ordinary teams could not even price out. One veteran official said the leak landed like a dropped wrench in a silent, shop-sharp, loud, and impossible to ignore. Riders, mechanics, and support crews all understood the real meaning behind the figure. Money at that scale bends a championship long before the first warm-up lap. It sets the pace, shapes the grid, and decides who gets to dream about a podium and who is stuck fighting scraps. And the source stayed silent through the chaos today. The budget books that weren't supposed to exist. The second shock arrived when auditors uncovered budget books that did not match the official reports. These were not simple rounding differences or late invoices. They were parallel ledgers, carefully maintained and deliberately hidden, showing streams of money routed into projects never acknowledged in public filings. Anyone who has spent time sorting shop receipts knows when the paper trail starts bending. The truth is usually somewhere far from the surface. The hidden books revealed payments labeled as consulting, freight, and material research, yet none of those payments matched known suppliers. Some entries used vague initials, others used offshore designations that raised eyebrows among those familiar with manufacturer accounting norms. What bothered investigators most was how clean the documents looked. They were not sloppy. They were built with intention, as if someone expected scrutiny and prepared for it long before the leak surfaced. Several former financial staffers said the numbers carried a signature they recognized from earlier seasons, meaning this system might have been operating for years without detection. That thought unsettled even hardened veterans of the paddock. If money could move like this without setting off alarms, then the sport's entire financial foundation looked less solid than anyone wanted to admit. The deeper the auditors dug, the more they realized the official budget was only a fraction of the story. That changed. If you're following how deep this leak really goes, make sure you like the video, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts below. The more riders we hear from, the clearer this picture becomes, and we've only scratched the surface of what's unfolding. Where speed gets bought in total silence. Behind every polished team announcement sits a network of development work that rarely sees daylight. The leak forced attention toward locations and programs long rumored but never confirmed. Places where prototypes are tested away from cameras and questions. These facilities operate on strict confidentiality rules, often requiring staff to surrender personal devices before entering. One technician described them as vaults built for speed, where every component is treated as a state secret. The leaked documents referenced projects with code names that did not appear in any official registry, each tied to time blocks and expenditures far beyond what teams usually disclose. Riders who had visited similar sites in earlier years said the atmosphere inside felt nothing like a normal test day. There were no casual conversations, no open experimentation, only targeted runs designed to pull data from unfamiliar parts. Some entries described early chassis concepts stored under composite covers, while other lines hinted at aerodynamic pieces shaped in private wind tunnels owned by partner firms. These details suggested a level of separation between public development and private advancement that had grown wider than most folks realized. Instead of an even playing field shaped by open paddock work, the real leaps were happening behind locked doors at hours when the rest of the grid slept. And this hidden pace raised questions the leak could no longer keep buried in the sport now. Take a second and check the description for the trusted gear I recommend. You'll see why preparation matters when a leak like this exposes the truth behind every race result. Engineers sound the alarm behind the scenes. The final part of the leak revealed something far more human than financial logs or secret facilities. It exposed the reaction inside the teams, a reaction that spread faster than any official briefing could contain. Engineers who usually kept their heads down and focused on their tasks began asking pointed questions in hushed tones. Some requested closed-door meetings with department leads. Others started saving emails and backing up files, a habit shared by people who sense a storm building. One longtime crew member said the paddock felt different overnight, as if everyone was waiting for a knock on the garage door. The leaked memos carried phrases that unsettled even seasoned staff. Lines about redirected priorities, sudden budget freezes, and accelerated development cycles nobody had been told about. Workers who had spent years building trust with their riders now wondered whether they had missed signs that something bigger was shifting beneath their feet. A few described moments when new parts arrived without explanation, tagged only with internal codes and instructions not to discuss them. The sudden pressure trickled through every rank, from data analysts to suspension technicians, each trying to understand how much had been hidden from them. And when the leak hit the public, those same individuals felt exposed, as if the world had been given a glimpse into conversations meant to stay buried. Many feared the leak was only the beginning. The high-cost hunt for mechanical perfection. When the leak broke, the first question everyone asked was simple. What does $50 million even buy? The answer became clearer once engineers started whispering about the layers of refinement hidden beneath each machine's fairings. The cost of speed has always been high, but today it lives in exotic materials, precision machining, and microscopic improvements that only specialists can see. Teams chase stiffness in one area of the chassis while searching for controlled flex in another, shaving fractions of a millimeter from components to dial in the exact feel a rider wants. Every bracket, every weld, and every cooling duct is shaped through hundreds of hours of testing. Aerodynamics consume another slice of the budget, with proprietary molds and wind tunnel sessions priced at levels that would surprise even seasoned mechanics. Some teams use layered composites that require specialized ovens and narrow production windows. Others refine cooling channels inside cylinder heads that look closer to medical equipment than motorcycle parts. It is a world where performance hides in details so small most riders would never spot them. Yet those details decide how the bike behaves at full lean or maximum acceleration. Once you understand how costly these refinements are, the size of the leaked figure stops sounding exaggerated and starts sounding calculated. And that leads straight into the next question teams wish nobody had asked. Rulebook blind spots, big enough to hide a factory truck. The rulebook looks like a strict document from the outside, but those who have worked in racing know it has seams wide enough to route entire programs through. The leak exposed how money moves through these seams in ways that remain technically legal, but strategically aggressive. Testing restrictions, for example, are easy to quote, but far harder to enforce. A team can outsource simulation to a partner company, label it as research unrelated to racing, and still feed the resulting data into their development cycle without violating a single written rule. vendor shells create another gray zone. A company can appear on the books as a supplier for basic components, while quietly producing prototype parts that never appear in official documentation. Payments flow to the vendor. The vendor channels resources into specialized tooling, and nothing in the process triggers an alert because everything looks compliant on paper. Even software testing falls into this territory, as teams often classify algorithm development under separate departments that technically fall outside racing operations. These blind spots have existed for years, but the leaked figures suggested someone had learned how to stack them together. The rulebook may forbid certain actions, but it rarely forbids the pathways that indirectly support them. Which brings us to the environment where these pathways collide long before race day. Factory politics that never reach the broadcast booth. Most fans see a unified factory team when the cameras turn on, but insiders know the shop floor tells a far different story. Power struggles shape the direction of development as much as any stopwatch. Engineers compete for influence, departments lobby for resources, and managers push projects that align with corporate deadlines rather than pure performance goals. When the leaked budget surfaced, they hinted at internal pressure strong enough to warp decision-making across entire programs. Some teams operate multiple development branches at once, each trying to prove its concept deserves priority. One group might push a new swing arm design, while another argues for engine refinements. And the final call often has more to do with politics than raw data. Boardroom expectations add another layer of strain. A manufacturer preparing for a major market launch may demand certain technologies debut on the race bike, even if the racing staff believes the parts are not ready. These battles rarely appear in broadcasts, yet they shape the machine riders depend on. A promising component can be shelved because the wrong department championed it, while a weaker idea can survive because it fits a corporate plan. When millions of dollars flow through an organization, influence becomes as valuable as innovation. And this tightrope leaves riders standing in a complicated place. Riders caught between talent and technology. They don't control. Behind every race result sits an uncomfortable truth. Riders often carry the blame for performance shaped by machinery they never chose. The leak threw this imbalance into sharp focus. A bike, built through heavily funded development cycles, can transform a talented rider into a championship contender, while a machine, still wrestling with technical setbacks, can bury that same rider deep in the standings. The gap has nothing to do with courage or commitment. It is simply the cost of competing in an era where technology casts a longer shadow than ever before. Contracts become fragile when machinery determines outcomes. A rider may lose opportunities because their equipment lags behind, even if their skill remains unquestioned. Meanwhile, someone on a better developed machine can shine brighter than their years would suggest, earning deals built on potential rather than proven experience. The risk on track increases as well. A bike that reacts inconsistently during corner entry or applies power unpredictably can turn a routine lap into a dangerous situation, and riders feel the consequences long before managers or sponsors do. What unsettled many within the paddock was how little control riders have over these variables. They provide feedback, they adapt, they push, but the machinery that shapes their fate is built in rooms far removed from the ones where they strap on their helmets. And now the leak forces everyone to consider what comes next. Sponsorship pressure that skews the entire grid. When the spending leak surfaced, the first reaction from major sponsors was not shock, but calculation. They understood immediately that a program pouring $50 million into development was not simply chasing victory. It was building a barrier nobody else could climb. Sponsors want two things above all else: predictability and exposure. A team spending that kind of money becomes a safer bet for both. So the financial tide starts leaning in one direction long before the season even begins. Smaller teams feel that pull first. They walk into meetings knowing the pitch is already tilted against them, because they cannot promise the same technological firepower. This pressure grows quietly. Contracts get shorter. Performance clauses get stricter. Marketing departments start favoring partnerships that guarantee screen time rather than support programs with potential. When enough of those decisions stack together, the grid reflects the imbalance. Teams at the top enjoy additional backing simply because they can afford the innovations that keep them there, while teams further down the order watch their options shrink. For riders, this means money begins deciding opportunities before talent ever gets tested. A proven rider on an underfunded program becomes invisible, while a less experienced rider on a well-funded machine gains the spotlight through better results alone. And that financial tilt filters into the stands as well. If you want the rest of this story as it develops, make sure you subscribe. This leak is only the beginning, and everything coming next could reshape MotoGP in ways fans never expected. Stay with us as the truth continues to surface. Fans feeling the soul of the sport slip away. Longtime fans felt something shift as the spending numbers spread through social circles and forums. They had sensed it for years, but never had a concrete figure to point to. Now the scale made sense. Predictable race outcomes were not the result of chance. They were the byproduct of a widening financial gulf that shaped everything from qualifying to final laps. Fans began remembering older eras, when underdogs could upset giants, when a privateer effort could shake the conversation, and when victories carried the thrill of possibility instead of inevitability. For many, racing has always been about heart, grit, and ingenuity. They respected elite teams, but they also loved watching a smaller outfit punch above its weight. As development budgets ballooned, those stories grew scarce. The races remained fast and spectacular, yet something quieter started fading. That emotional spark, the belief that anyone on the grid could change the outcome with courage and skill, grew harder to hold on to. Some fans adapted, choosing to appreciate the technology on its own terms. Others drifted away, feeling the sport no longer reflected the values they grew up with. The discussion turned nostalgic, filled with references to eras when craftsmanship and daring could offset limited resources. And that nostalgia grew louder as officials chose their words carefully. When officials stay quiet, the whole paddock gets nervous. When reporters asked officials about the spending leak, the responses came slowly and sounded strangely rehearsed. They acknowledged the situation without providing substance. They referenced competitive balance while avoiding any concrete statements about oversight or future regulation. It was the kind of silence that said more than any official announcement could. Teams noticed it first. When leadership hesitates, uncertainty trickles down through every department on the grid. Mechanics whispered about delayed meetings. Managers read between the lines of memos that seemed intentionally vague. Engineers wondered whether new restrictions were being drafted behind closed doors or whether the governing body preferred to let the storm pass unnoticed. In motorsports, clarity is a stabilizing force, so the absence of it fuels speculation faster than any rumor. Even riders felt the shift. They rely on consistent rules to shape their careers, contracts, and expectations. When officials speak in circles, riders recognize the warning signs. A silent paddock is rarely a calm one. It usually signals that conversations are happening privately, and those conversations often lead to sudden policy changes that alter competitive balance overnight. Fans recognized the tension as well. They heard clipped interviews, watched non-answers, and sensed the discomfort behind each public appearance. In a sport built on precision, uncertainty becomes a dangerous ingredient. And that uncertainty feeds directly into a deeper question about the sport's direction. The ethics of a sport that forgot its roots. As the numbers settled into public view, a broader conversation emerged, one that reached beyond lap times and into the sport's identity. Racing was never supposed to be a contest defined solely by financial muscle. Its legacy was built on bravery, creativity, and the belief that determination could overcome limited resources. Older fans remembered eras when a rider's instinct mattered more than a team's budget. Engineers remembered nights spent crafting solutions by hand, instead of ordering precision components from specialized laboratories. Even riders felt the shift, knowing their reputations depended increasingly on technology rather than raw ability. The ethical concern was not jealousy or resistance to progress. It was the sense that the sport's foundation had drifted. When development budgets surpass what many small teams could accumulate in a decade, the competitive fabric stretches thin. Opportunities shrink. Innovation centralizes. The human element fades behind layers of data and machinery. For some insiders, the leak felt like a turning point. They believed it exposed a moral imbalance that had been building slowly under the surface. This did not mean the sport was beyond repair. Instead, it revealed the growing tension between tradition and modern engineering. The challenge moving forward was not to halt progress, but to preserve the values that once made the sport accessible, unpredictable, and deeply human. And that brings the story into its final stage, where consequences ripple beyond the paddock and into the wider world, watching it unfold. When big money starts steering an entire motorsport world, the leak did more than shake a single paddock. It reminded everyone how easily money begins steering the direction of an entire motorsport ecosystem. Fans who follow multiple leagues have seen spending spirals before, and many recognized the early signs as soon as the numbers surfaced. When one team commits $50 million to development, it sends a signal across every other racing discipline. Suddenly the standard shifts, the expectations change, and the culture around competition starts leaning toward financial escalation rather than innovation or craft. Other racing series have faced similar crossroads. Some watched budgets swell until only a few teams could compete for championships. Others introduced new regulations to slow the curve, with mixed results. The pattern is familiar. Once spending rises beyond a certain threshold, the rest of the field feels obligated to follow or risk falling behind permanently. What begins as a pursuit of excellence becomes a chase for survival. This is why the leak rattled more than insiders. It hinted at a global trend repeating itself yet again, one that often begins with optimism and ends with consolidation. Fans who lived through previous eras of runaway costs know that competitive spirit can be strained when money dictates outcomes more predictably than talent. And the manufacturers watching closely understand that the ripple effects extend far beyond racetrack results. What manufacturers take from racing, manufacturers have always treated racing as a proving ground. The track acts as a laboratory, a stage where ideas receive the harshest testing possible. When something succeeds under that pressure, its legacy travels outward into production models, marketing campaigns, and long-term strategy. Yet the leak exposed an uncomfortable reality. Not every innovation found on a race machine can survive the journey to a street bike. Some breakthroughs cost too much to manufacture. Others rely on materials or processes that cannot be scaled without undermining profitability. Riders have seen this before. A brilliant concept appears during a championship run, catches the attention of enthusiasts, and then disappears because the financial burden to adapt it outweighed the commercial reward. When development budgets rise into tens of millions, the technological gulf between race bikes and consumer models grows wider. The machines become showcases of possibility rather than previews of what riders might eventually own. This is not always a negative outcome. Racing has pushed boundaries that shaped the entire motorcycle world. But when spending becomes extreme, it creates a filter strong enough to prevent promising ideas from reaching regular riders. The leak highlighted that tension and reminded many in the industry of earlier periods when innovation outpaced practicality. And that tension becomes even clearer when the costs migrate from the factory floor to the buyer's wallet. How these leaks hit regular riders in the wallet. For everyday riders, the financial shock does not appear in leaked spreadsheets or insider reports. It shows up in pricing sheets at dealerships and maintenance bills years down the line. When factories justify steep research budgets, a portion of those expenses inevitably flows into consumer products. a technology developed for racing, even if only loosely related to a production model, becomes part of a narrative used to explain why prices need to rise. Riders recognize the pattern because they have lived through it for decades. Higher development costs often lead to higher base prices. Components built with exotic materials, even when simplified for the street, still cost more to produce. Engines designed around race-inspired tolerances often require more precise service, specialized tools, or premium fluids. As budgets grow, the expectation of recouping investment grows with them. And the result is felt by buyers who simply want a reliable machine without absorbing the weight of bleeding-edge engineering. Some riders accept this trade-off because they value the connection between racing and street models. Others feel increasingly disconnected, sensing that the sport's financial arms race is shaping products they cannot afford or maintain. The leak did not create this divide, but it illuminated how the cycle works. And that leads to a final question the entire sport must answer before the damage reaches a point of no return. A future MotoGP must choose before it loses its soul. The leak forced the sport to confront a defining choice. It could continue down the path of unrestrained spending, allowing budgets to rise until only a handful of programs possess the means to contend for championships. Or it could recalibrate, acknowledging that long-term health depends on preserving the competitive unpredictability that drew fans to the sport in the first place. Neither option is simple, and both require sacrifices. Sustainability in motorsport does not mean limiting innovation. It means ensuring that progress does not come at the expense of the values that built the sport. The question moving forward is how to structure rules, incentives, and financial frameworks so that engineering brilliance can flourish without turning competition into a predictable hierarchy of wealth. Some insiders argue for stricter development caps. Others believe transparency alone could rebuild trust. A few suggest revisiting formats that reward creativity rather than sheer financial muscle. Racing survives only when it stays true to its roots. Its legacy was built on grit, risk, and the belief that human skill could rise above mechanical limits. But when boardrooms and unchecked spending take control, the sport's soul begins to fade no matter how fast the machines become. The future now hinges on one choice: preserve courage and competition, or surrender everything to escalating costs and quiet corporate ambition. That's the truth as it stands. Not rumors, not outrage, just how the money is shaping the sport right now. If you've been around long enough, you've probably felt this shift coming. Drop your take in the comments and tell us what you've seen change over the years. If you value straight talk like this, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us. There's more to uncover.